Good afternoon. Welcome to a Facebook Live from the Kansas Association of School Boards. I'm Brian Jordan, Deputy Director here at KASB.
I'm Angie Stallbaumer. I'm Assistant Executive Director for Legal Services.
So we thought we would take a moment and provide some updates and guidance related to school leadership and give you some things to consider and discuss back home in your districts around the board table. I know everybody is scrambling in these times to figure out what's the appropriate steps to take. Obviously, we know we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, and so we want to try to give you some reminders, some things to think about related to leadership within your district, the functioning of your school board. We plan to provide an update like this daily for the foreseeable future, giving you insights, giving you things to consider or think about as you sit around your board table back in your district. Just another piece of information that will be coming out here in the next 24 hours or so. We've been working, Angie and I have been in meetings off and on all day with KNEA, USA, KSSA to put together some key talking points and guidance related to district operations. So we're going to jump in and talk a little bit about some things that boards need to keep in mind. One thing is, and Dale Dennis affirmed this today in a meeting with superintendents, boards of education need to continue to meet going forward. It's essential that they're meeting so that they're talking about paying, obviously to pay their bills and handling those day-to-day operations of the district, but also to start to talk about the things that are coming out as some discussion points related to duty of staff, how you're going to handle some different staff situations. So, Angie, what are some reminders as they think about getting their board together that they need to also keep in mind?
Sure. Now would be a good time to look at whether or not you have designated another staff member to pay bills in advance, things like that. For whatever reason, if you had to cancel a regularly scheduled board meeting due to a health or safety emergency, that person could go ahead and pay those bills and take care of those things in the interim. So if you haven't already chosen that individual or done that through board action or policy, now's a good time to do that. As far as meeting times, we're reaching out to the Kansas Attorney General's office just to make sure that we're all on the same page about what's required in an open meeting setting, knowing that there may be more of a drive to have people attend virtually. So if you have board members attending through Zoom, we're touching base with the AG's office to see if they would be on board with all of our board members being in attendance via Zoom, or how accessible do we need to make that meeting to those that want to show up and attend. So for right now, I think our recommendation would be you still need to ensure that those people that want to perceive the meeting have an opportunity in real time to do that. And even if the restrictions are such that we can't put everybody in the same room, if they could view it in another way while it's happening, that's probably what we're going to have to look at. Yeah. And it may mean from a standpoint of distancing, socially distancing ourselves, that we have to look at having those meetings in a different room in the school district, in which case I think the best we can probably do is give as much notice as possible, put it out on your website, post it on the door, have a staff member standing where you would normally have your meeting, and maybe allow a little grace period for those to go to the auditorium and spread out as opposed to having it in the board meeting room.
So some things that are going to make it a little more complicated going forward. The most recent guidance from the CDC has said no more than 50 people gathered in a location. This afternoon, there was an announcement from the president's office. The president himself said there should be no more than 10 people gathered in a location. So we're going to tomorrow hopefully have a little more clear guidance on what that means. And as Angie just said, some obvious solutions are you're going to have to look at possibly providing virtual access or digital access to your meetings to provide that access piece. A couple other things that are going to be on your plates as board leaders and district leaders, if they're not already there, is how do we handle compensation of staff? Certified staff is a little less complicated due to contract requirements, and they're a salaried employee. Where it gets very complicated is when we start to discuss classified staff and how we want to handle those situations. We've gotten word today of a couple of districts for this week. They're handling classified staff compensation just as they would a snow day, and they're going to kind of play it by ear as this rolls out. As you all are very aware, there was guidance given that schools should be closed this week. But that will be a discussion that your board will have to have in the coming days, weeks, is how are we going to handle classified staff? So some things we want you to think about or keep in mind with classified staff is those folks, if you're paying them today or if you're paying them throughout this week, your budget has that money allocated. The thing that you have to weigh and that we don't have an answer to yet is what do we do if school gets extended? And then you're going to be in a situation where your budget numbers maybe don't support those additional hours. And so it's not an easy decision to make at this point in time. Do we continue to pay these people? Do we have people come in that are considered essential staff to do the cleaning and we can pay them for their time for doing the deep cleaning in our building? Those are some questions that the board will have to work through. And we hope to continue to provide updates and possible guidance here related to those situations. I do want to point out or emphasize a point that was raised by Dale Dennis this afternoon. If they're a special education para and you're having them report to assist with work in your district that is non-special education related, you can't use special education dollars to pay those folks. And so that was a question that popped up today in a meeting, and just want to make sure that you have some clarity on that. Angie, any other thoughts on staff or things to keep in mind?
We've had several questions today concerning classified staff. And I think something to just keep in mind is that if you do pay it forward and you're paying staff members to be there when they aren't working, you do have to keep in mind if they're not performing summer functions now, for example, your custodial staff, maybe you can have them come in and do projects that they otherwise would have done at another time of the year, just to make sure that they have, duties to fill their time. But if they do come back in the summer and their contract is extended, we can't allow them to work for free in the summer. So you're going to have to pay them for that too. So there is the financial liability you have to figure in when you're deciding how many of our staff members are we going to pay over a term without providing any work functions for that. For your licensed staff members, keep in mind that this is going to be a situation we're going to have to be transparent with the bargaining unit, and you'll be receiving communications from these groups. As Ryan mentioned, we've met today, so you need to be transparent. If you need to keep in mind the hours and amounts of work are mandatorily negotiable, that a lot of you have adopted a calendar that has a specific end date, so we need to be prepared that that's going to be a discussion that we're probably going to have to take at least to the MOU level to work out.
Yeah, that's been a point of discussion that we've had today with KNEA, USA, and KSSA. Number one on that list is safety of staff and students, and then number two on this list is how do we try to make sure that we're trying to meet kids' needs the best that we can. And there are really no out-of-the-box answers for some of this. And so there is a task force that the State Department has assembled that's going to be generating ideas and thoughts related to how to provide services for students and education for students if we're potentially out of school for a longer term period. The consistent message that all those groups we're talking about today is it's got to be a collaborative effort. We got to get around the table sooner rather than later. So that's another piece going here forward in this week and into next week. You need to try to sit down some board leaders, your administrators, and your teacher leaders around the table and talk about scenarios, talk about what's it going to look like. Stay tuned to guidance that this KSD task force is working on for providing education. I know a lot of districts are also talking about how to serve students lunches and breakfast. That's another topic of discussion. There's a lot of support and guidance out there being offered up by KASD on that topic, so that'll be something that you want to tune in and have some discussion about here in the coming days. Let me look at my notes here.
We focused a lot of attention on the mandatory school term as far as number of days and hours, and I think one thing we need to keep in mind is our populations that, like our special education students that might have individual education plans that we need to account for changes in as well, and continued services. So on top of everything else, you need to keep that on your plate as well.
Yeah. So we're going to try to wrap some things up here. Just a little bit of update on KASB. Our offices are open. We do plan to continue to provide service to districts around the state. We have gone ahead and canceled any events that we had scheduled where there were 50 or more people planning to assemble, so that does impact the Women's Leadership Summit that was scheduled to happen next week. We are looking to reschedule that later in the year. You will need to cancel your hotel rooms, but we're canceling your registration and you'll have to re-register for that. We did have our first session of leadership for tomorrow scheduled to happen this Thursday and Friday. Because of schools being shut down, we've had to postpone those two visits. We're going to try to work in some dates, obviously, later in the summer or early fall next year to make up those dates. We continue to be available via phone, via email, so don't hesitate to reach out and contact us with any questions or support that you're needing related to the operations and leadership in your districts.
And we're looking into options to host our regional meetings and our human resources academies a little bit differently. So hopefully you'll be able to access that material and the speakers online. So we'll look for those options in the coming weeks.
Yep. So for today, I think that concludes some of our key talking points related to leading your district in this time that we're in with a lot of unknowns. And we look forward to visiting with you tomorrow.